Hello everybody, Blue Smoke Productions here, and welcome to the Blue Smoke Show. This is a brand new podcast that is hosted only by me for right now, although I may get a co-host, or I'll definitely get some guests on this show, hopefully, sometime soon. This is just a pilot episode, so it's not going to be anything too special, but I actually did want to start off with something big, so I figured I would make this first podcast about me chasing Union Pacific 4014. Because it was a chase that almost didn't happen. It was something I never thought would be happening, and let alone the year the big boy came back. I was expecting to chase it like 3 years from now, but I got it done, and even then, I still can't believe I did it. Like, I can't believe I've done my first mainline chase. My first mainline chase was the big boy, and I can't believe I did it. So I guess I should go into a little bit of the background of this chase and how it happened. So 2019 rolls around, Union Pacific 4014 returned to Steam. And I wanted to go see it in Steam. I had previously 2 years prior seen Union Pacific Big Boy 4005 on display in Denver, Colorado. And I knew my dad wanted to go see the big boy as well, because the big boy is his favorite locomotive. But I wanted to go see this thing run again. I knew this was going to be the biggest event in railfan history, and I wanted to go see it. Unfortunately, life got in the way. I was working on film school. I was wrapping up film school at the time. Dad had work, mom had work, the whole family was working, I was working. It just wasn't going to work out. So it just never happened. The doubleheader with 4014, 844, we didn't get to go see it. Then I found out shortly afterwards the big boy was going to be doing a tour across the Northwest, and the farthest it was coming was PA, and I live pretty far from Pennsylvania. Earlier that year, we had actually talked about going to see 611 in Pennsylvania, but due to other complications, that trip never happened either. At the end of that year, sometime, I think it had to have been September, maybe it was August even, I found out the big boy would be doing another tour across the Midwest. So I looked at the listings for the tour across the Midwest, and I knew it wasn't coming to Georgia. There was no way it was going to come to Georgia. Union Pacific doesn't own any tracks this far east. I saw that the big boy was coming to Arkansas. And Arkansas is not too far from where I live. Well, it's about 8 hours. And we had previously been to Arkansas. We went to Arkansas in 2017, same trip where I went to go see the Grand Canyon Railway and the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. That's also where I saw Union Pacific 4005. So we had been to Arkansas before. And I went to my dad. I told him, like, hey, the big boy's coming to Arkansas. And I expected him to be like, we don't have time for that. We can't do that. But to my surprise, my dad said maybe. Bringing up that Arkansas is not far from here, it's a drive we can do within 1 day. It sounded like we could actually make this happen. And sure enough, my dad did all the booking. He was able to get time off. Well, he had vacation time, so he could take time off from work to do it. And everything just worked out. My brother got time off work so he could come too. I needed him as well. I needed him to navigate, and I needed my dad to be getaway driver, because that's my thing. I don't go railfanning or chasing by myself. I feel like I need a getaway driver there, just because I don't trust myself driving on these kind of trips, especially since I knew the traffic was going to be terrible. Because the big boy can attract crowds. It's not even funny. It can attract some crowds. I think originally what we were going to do is we were going to drive to Arkansas on Wednesday, see the big boy on static display Thursday, and then Friday chase it as far as Conway and then leave from Conway. We decided instead to stay an extra day and spend the night after the chase, stay in our hotel in Arkansas, and then leave on Saturday. And that was a much better thing to do, because if we had done it the previous way, the big boy video would have only been like 2 or 3 minutes. It wouldn't have been a long video at all. So we decided to stay an extra day. Originally, I had everything mapped out to just go to Conway, and I think I had about 10 spots between North Little Rock and Conway. But as finding out on the trip, yeah, I would have only gotten 4 of those spots in general, because that big boy attracted so many crowds that I was only able to get 4 of those 10 spots that I mapped out. And I think I officially put down, I want to say I put 20 spots in total, and I think we only got 9 of those on the trip, officially. And I'm really pleased with those 9 shots. They are probably some of my best work I've ever filmed, even better than any of my short films or anything like that. So we left for North Little Rock around Wednesday at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., sometime around that point. We dropped my little brother off at school. My little brother was not coming on this trip, nor was my mother. It was just my dad and my older brother. After we dropped my little brother off, we made our long journey to North Little Rock. We each took turns driving. You know, my dad drove he drove us across through the Alabama border. Then we stopped and got some breakfast at a Waffle House. Then I took over driving, and I crossed the border into Mississippi, and then I think stopped somewhere in Mississippi. Then Dad took over and drove us through Memphis, Tennessee. And after Memphis, my older brother took over, and we drove the rest of the way to North Little Rock. So we stopped at this hotel in North Little Rock. It was a pretty nice hotel. It wasn't anything too fancy, but it was a good sleeping arrangement and everything. And I remember I went back out to the car to grab my coat, because I'd left my coat in the car, and I went to go grab my brother's coat as well, and I knew we were going to need our coats because it was going to be kind of cold the following day. And I remember I went out to grab my coat, and I heard the big boy's whistle. I just heard it, like it was this echo, but I knew it was the big boy's whistle. And I'm just like, I was so excited, because I'm just like, I mean, yeah, I knew the big boy was in the North Little Rock yard, and I knew we weren't too far from it, but I was like looking at the maps and, you know, the big boy's tracker, and I knew that the big boy was in the North Little Rock yard. So I was excited. I was very excited to see the big boy run again. Well, I was very excited to hear it. And I knew tomorrow I was going to get to see it in person on static display. So we had a game plan set up. We only intended to stay in the North Little Rock yard for about an hour, because I didn't need to be there all day. I just wanted to get some pictures and then get some videos for the opening for the Might of the Big Boy video. So we were only going to stay in the North Little Rock yard for maybe an hour or an hour and a half. Then after that, we would travel all the way down to Pine Bluff to go and see Cotton Belt 819, which is on display at the Arkansas Railroad Museum in Pine Bluff. And that was the plan we stuck with. I think we stayed for about an hour and a half. They said the gates for the UP yard would be opening at 9, and they wouldn't open before then. But we went there an hour early, around 8-ish, and 8:30-ish. And they were already doing ferry buses to the yard, and yeah, that's what we did. We took a ferry bus to the North Little Rock yard, and that's where I saw Union Pacific 4014 for the first time. And you know, seeing a big boy is amazing. I remember when I saw 4005 in Denver, I was so amazed by its size and just looking at it. I couldn't get very many good photos of 4005 though, because it was inside of a building and the displays for it weren't the best. But I went to go see 4014, and the thing I noticed immediately, 4014 looked a lot smaller than 4005, and I know that's because it was outside, because when it was inside, 4005 had all these like obstacles around it that made it look huge. 4005, it's out in the open. I do think I was thinking maybe because it had the Challenger tender on it as well. It does have the tender for the now retired 3985 on it, but it was using the Challenger tender, and I was thinking to myself, like, is that why it looks smaller? But no, the Challenger tenders and the Big Boy tenders, I'm pretty sure were the same type of tender. So that's not it at all. I think it was just because it was outside, it looked smaller than the one I saw in Denver. Also, the one I saw in Denver actually looked like it was in better condition than the one that was running, because some of the parts on the Big Boy still looked pretty worn. And I know some of them are its original parts. And it was kind of funny, just like thinking about it. Like, this locomotive that's been on display for years looks like it's in better condition than the one that was just returned to operating condition. But nonetheless, I was happy to see the Big Boy. It was amazing to look at that thing, just to see one under steam. And I remember a mainline freight train came in to the North Little Rock Yard, and I got a video of it. And then shortly after, the Big Boy, like, as soon as I turned off the camera, the Big Boy let off its loud whistle. And I was just amazed hearing it. It kind of scared me a little bit. But it was so amazing to hear it up close. And I remember I was like looking, my dad came up shortly afterwards, and I was like, is it any wonder why we could hear it all the way from our hotel? Shortly afterwards, they announced they would blow the whistle once every hour. So as soon as the clock struck 9, the Big Boy blew its whistle again, and that was the shot you see in the video. Shortly after that, I went inside the Union Pacific car, and it was a very nice car. It had all kinds of historical information about the Union Pacific. It had pictures of all the Union Pacific steam locomotives that operate and the steam fleet. It was a good little display, a good little rolling museum in a way. So we went through that. We left. The interesting thing is, as we left, there weren't too many people at the display site for the Big Boy, but by the time we were leaving, it was packed. Like, the display was packed. So shortly after we left the Big Boy display site, we drove all the way down to Pine Bluff, Arkansas to go to the Arkansas Railroad Museum and see Cotton Belt 819. The Arkansas Railroad Museum is honestly one of my favorite museums of all time. The staff are very friendly. The museum has loads of really cool equipment, and admission is free, so you really have no reason not to go to that museum. And of course, the main reason I went there was to see Cotton Belt 819. And seeing this one in the flesh, honestly, on videos, Cotton Belt 819 didn't look like it was in great condition. But when you look at it up close, the locomotive's actually in really good condition. People are like saying, oh, I feel sorry for the condition of this locomotive. The locomotive's actually in really good condition. They were basically, this is the story of 819. This is the story that the elderly gentleman who worked at the museum told me. After 819's final excursion in 1993, they dismantled it for its overhaul. I think they had just put a new set of flues in the engine. They were just about finished with the boiler ultrasound. Basically, they were on the home stretch for the restoration. However, during that time, there was a train crash where an Amtrak diesel came off of a bridge, and this was because a tugboat had hit the bridge. Because of this accident, Amtrak's insurance went up, and as such, the insurance to run 819 also went up. So that was a big problem. That put the restoration at an initial halt. I think they were going to try and work something out with the Cotton Belt line itself and see if they could get 819 to just run on that instead. However, sometime around that point, Union Pacific bought the line, and Union Pacific announced that 819 would not be running on their tracks. And the reason for this is because Union Pacific only wants Union Pacific locomotives on their track. 819 is obviously not a Union Pacific locomotive. It's a Cotton Belt locomotive. And at a stretch, it's a Southern Pacific locomotive. And I can tell by the way the elderly gentleman who worked at the museum was talking, they are holding out for an opportunity to run 819 again. They are very much holding out for an opportunity. They're eager. They want it to run again. But most of the people who worked on the 819 back in the 80s and 90s have all since passed away. There's only a few left. They don't have a huge crew. The museum mostly relies on donations, so if you are there, do donate. It's very important that you should donate to keep this museum going. The museum claims they're going to do a cosmetic restoration on 819, or they've claimed they're going to try and do a cosmetic restoration. However, if an opportunity for 819 to run again presents itself, 819's original ultrasonic test is no longer valid. So if an opportunity presents itself, they have to dismantle the locomotive all over again and redo the test. Personally, I think they should just put the boiler sheeting on the locomotive and call it a day, because I can't see an opportunity for the locomotive running again to ever happen. For starters, 819 is a big locomotive, so most smaller heritage railroads won't be able to take it. And also, it's just Union Pacific won't sponsor any repairs on it. It won't run under Union Pacific insurance. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. I think it will happen one day. I just wouldn't bet on this anytime soon. 819 is a great locomotive, and honestly, it's actually in really good condition. And for the condition it's displayed in, I think they just need to put the boiler sheeting on it and just call it a day. The locomotive is in very good condition, and with the boiler sheeting on it, it would look like new, I think. So I think that is the wise move, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe one day Cotton Belt 819 will run again, but we'll see. So in addition to Cotton Belt 819, the museum also owns Cotton Belt 336, which is a small mogul. And in all honesty, compared to 819's condition, 336 looks even worse. That one needs a cosmetic restoration. And yeah, it's kind of displayed. It's displayed behind the 819. It's kind of in a terrible spot for display. That is one thing about the museum I didn't like, was the displays on it weren't the best. The only good display on it was 819's display. They have a really good display for 819. All the other locomotives are stored between these pillars that get in the way. 336 is very hard to get a good photograph of, and I'm surprised my photograph of the locomotive turned out so good. They also had a lot of really nice diesel locomotives, and the diesel locomotives there are, most of them are in really good condition. That was one of the things I loved about the museum. Most of the equipment there is equipment I've seen before, but I've never seen all that equipment together. Like, I've seen a blue and yellow Santa Fe diesel, and I've seen, a Southern Pacific diesel. I've seen a lot of the diesels that were there, but I'd never seen them together like that. There was a red and black diesel there, and the elderly gentleman who ran the museum, he told me, or I told my dad this, that he painted the locomotive himself in honor of UGA, the University of Georgia. So, because we told him we were from Georgia, so it was really cool, honestly, to do that. And he knew we were there for the big boy. Everyone who visited the museum that day, and there was one other group, they were all there to see the big boy. Like, I think I mentioned, like, my dad mentioned to him, we came all the way from Georgia, and he didn't even have to guess. He was like, "You came here for the big boy, didn't you?" And it was he was a very nice man. It was a good museum. I highly recommend the Arkansas Railroad Museum if you go to it. Make sure you donate, and make sure you buy a shirt or something, buy some of their merch, because that museum only relies on that kind of stuff to go. Other than that, admission is free. So I bought a shirt there, and I donated to the museum. So hopefully that all goes into keeping that museum going. Maybe it could go into a potential restoration of the 819, but who knows? We'll see what happens. So Friday morning comes and it's chase day. The big boy was going to be pulling out of North Little Rock, Arkansas. I think it was going to pull out at like 9 or 10. May have actually been 8 o'clock. I don't remember for sure how early it was going to be pulling out, but it definitely didn't start on time. I'll tell you that much. That was one thing about that whole chase. The big boy got behind schedule as the trip went on. Like by the end of the chase, it was a full hour behind schedule. So the first shot I got was in North Little Rock along the street. It was the shot you see at the beginning. It's the one that's along the road where the big boy, and that, and it crosses over a small road bridge. And that's where I knew I wanted to start. And the big boy came thundering out. I don't actually remember what time it was by that point. All I remember is that it was super cold that morning, and I'd actually lost one of my gloves at the Arkansas Railroad Museum. But it felt like I waited there for about an hour for the big boy to come. And sure enough, it came. It finally came through, and I remember I was looking at it. It was so beautiful. It was probably one of my most beautiful shot, just watching. It was so cold that morning that there was loads of steam coming out of that double stack, and it came through. It wasn't going too fast, but I realized early on that I wasn't going to be able to get every single shot that I had mapped out because of how close some of these shots were to each other. And we ended up skipping like 4 shots before I was finally able to catch the big boy again in Parlin Park. And that was a really good shot, in my opinion. I was like, I knew we were going to beat the big boy to that. And I remember looking at it, and that spot was on the maps, and it was a deep red. And the big boy came thundering through that spot. That was honestly one of my favorite spots as well. That's the thing, I can't pick a favorite spot. Every spot in that whole video is really good. And the Lake Conway was the third spot I got. That spot was a spot I kind of picked last minute. I remember seeing it on the maps, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to get to that spot. But I think we passed it. My dad was like, "Do you want to get this one?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, sure." And there was a Dollar General right up the street. I knew that was there, so I'm just like, "Pull up to that Dollar General. I'll run back and get it." So he did that, and I ran back, went across the bridge, and filmed the railroad bridge that ran parallel. And that was another really good shot. And one of the things about seeing the big boy run in person compared to watching it on videos, what's really fun about watching it in person is just looking at those articulated wheels go, especially like watching both driver sets. It looks almost like there's 2 locomotives pulling the train, but it's not. It's just one. So the next shot was in Conway, Arkansas, next to an apartment complex. It was on a curve, and the reason why I picked that spot was because I wanted to see that articulation joint on the big boy get used. I knew I wanted to see that, and I knew that was going to be an important shot, and it was a pretty good shot, too. It would have been better if the crossing gates had not been in the way, and someone also got in my shot, which was, it was kind of rude, but I don't think she saw that I was there, and it was fine. I'm not mad about it or anything. The thing I loved about this shot, though, is this was when the big boy gave all the stack talk. There's actually a point where the locomotive's doing loads of stack talk. Then it, like, either the wheel slipped or the engineer let off on the throttle. I don't know which happened. My dad is convinced that the engineer actually let off on the throttle so that the engine would slip, and then started bringing the stack talk back up. I'm pretty sure it was also on an incline, though, so it was a good shot in terms of like sound. So we got that shot. Then I'm trying to remember for a second, what shot did I get next? Plummerville was the next shot I got. I remember the first time the crossing gates went down when a mainline freight train came through, and the big boy had been parked in order to let that train pass. Then the big boy came through after that, but when that diesel powered through, I remember when the crossing gates were getting on, everyone was like getting their cameras ready. It's like, oh, here it comes. And then a diesel horn went off, and I'm just like, that's not it. That's definitely not it. So the train went through. It's in the video. Then shortly after that, the big boy came through, and this was the best performance the big boy gave. Like, this was the best whistle the big boy gave, and this was the fastest the locomotive came through. It came through at like 60, and it just booked it right through Plumerville, right over the crossing. It was a good shot. I chose to film on the fireman's side for this one rather than the driver's side because all my other shots are on the driver's side. And yeah, I hadn't filmed it. I hadn't filmed it running on the fireman's side. So it was a nice different shot. It's nice and wide. And yeah, so it's a good shot. Shortly afterwards, the locomotive went into, I think it was Morrilton. And I set up just outside of where the locomotive was going to be pulling out. And that was probably the slowest I ever saw the locomotive go. That's the only time I also ever heard the bell. But it was a good shot when the locomotive came out. So it was a nice slow shot, you know, in contrast to the previous shot where the locomotive was going full speed. Well, it definitely wasn't going full speed, but it had to have been doing 60. Sometime after that, I caught the big boy I was filming from across the street of a liquor store, and the big boy was passing this corn mill, and I picked this spot simply because I knew we could get to it, and there was parking there. And it was another really good shot. And, but the next shot, I forget what the name, I think it was Atkins, Arkansas, that we went through next. And Atkins is, it was probably the most suburban town that we went through in Arkansas, because all the other places we'd been through were small towns. So we went through Atkins, Arkansas, and Atkins was, well, here's the thing. We crossed over this bridge, and we lost the big boy up to this point. We didn't know where the big boy was. And we thought we'd lost it. And we pulled into Atkins. And it was just like, it was 2 o'clock. It was supposed to have been pulled out by now. But then we found it. I saw the smoke. And I wasn't sure if it was a building or if it was the big boy. But as we got a little bit closer, I was like, oh, wait, that is the big boy. And we crossed over this bridge. And the big boy was going under the bridge at the same time. And it was like same time, both were going under. As we were going over, the train was going under. And I remember I was on top of the bridge. We were on top of the bridge. I looked to my right where the Atkins Depot was, and I could see this huge crowd surrounding the railroad tracks and surrounding the depot. And you would have thought Elvis was on the train. It was that crowded. So after we went through Atkins, I obviously did not go down to the depot because of how crowded it was. I just skipped over to the next spot, which was a very beautiful spot. It was the Illinois Bayou, or Bio. I don't know how it's pronounced. Basically, when we got there was a car accident on the bridge. And that was like really annoying that there was a car accident on the bridge. But we managed to get through it. And Dad was smart. He parked across the street rather than parking in the parking lot that was at the bottom right next to the bridge. So I immediately got out. I went and crossed the street and filmed the small bridge part of the causeway. And waited a good long time for that. But eventually the locomotive came through, and it was a really good shot as well. I almost wanted to change the color of the sky to orange because I think that would look really good. I may do that in Photoshop, honestly. After that, we did the final shot, which was in Lamar, Arkansas. Sorry, the name escaped me. And I think originally we were thinking about London, Arkansas. I had a spot set up for that, but I'm just like, you know what? Tell you what. Skip that one. We're going to Lamar. And it was a good call that I did because this was the least crowded spot I had ever been to. And that spot, it was so good. Like, it was it was kind of like a secret spot. Only about 8 people showed up to that spot. All of them thought they were going to be alone, but it was such a small spot. And I was worried it was private property originally. It was on this long, winding road. It was a very small road. It was on, like, part of it turned to dirt and then it turned back into asphalt. And we came in, and there was about 8 people there. And even the police chief of Lamar came through. And I think him and my dad were talking. He was a very nice guy, by the way, according to my dad. But he was talking to my dad, and he was, like, telling us, like, how did you know about this? Because only the locals knew about this. And my dad was like, I found it. And I found that spot because I had found a 360 on it on Google Maps. And I'm just like, this spot is perfect. So I chose to film there, and I got a really good shot out of it. It was really nice. It was a good final shot. We were gonna try and get one more shot in Ozark, but I think it was shortly before Ozark. But by the time we'd gotten there, the big boy had already passed us, and my dad and brother were getting tired. I was probably getting a little tired as well, but we decided, you know what, we'll call it a day there, and we went back to our hotel in Arkansas, and the next day we left for Georgia. So that is my story about chasing the big boy, and that's the first episode of the Blue Smoke Show. I guess some final thoughts on this show. I really would love to thank my dad and brother for going on this trip with me. I don't think they're going to watch this show, but it was fun. I enjoyed doing this. I would gladly do it again if the big boy ever comes back to Arkansas. And I've got a full list of shots that I didn't use in the first time around, so I would definitely chase it again. So that is the first episode of the Blue Smoke Show. I hope you guys enjoyed this show. Comment down below what you'd like to see me talk about next on the show. Comment down below what kind of guests you'd like on this show. And with that said, this is Blue Smoke Productions saying goodbye. Thank you for watching. Au revoir.